special report.
Good afternoon, I'm Whit Johnson. We're coming on the air because President Biden is about to address the nation, responding to today's Supreme Court ruling, striking down his student debt relief program just hours after the court delivered a huge blow to his agenda. The president is now expected to announce new actions on student loans, already vowing that the fight is not over. Now, in the 6-3 decision authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, the conservative justices ruled the president doesn't have the authority to erase $400 billion in debt for 43 million Americans without congressional approval. The plan would have erased $10,000 in debt for borrowers earning less than $125,000 a year, and even more, perhaps double, for those who took out Pell Grants to pay for college. Now, in her dissent, Justice Elena Kagan taking direct aim at the majority, accusing conservative justices of exceeding the court's role and making national policy. Today's decision, while being a huge setback, is not totally unexpected. The White House has been pressed repeatedly about having a possible plan B just in case the court ruled against the president. Now, this will be the second time in 24 hours President Biden has come before the cameras following a Supreme Court decision. He slammed yesterday's ruling, striking down affirmative action policies used for college admissions applications. And when asked at the time if this was a rogue court, President Biden replied, "This is not a normal court," accusing it of doing more to unravel basic rights than any court in recent history. Republicans, of course, have been quick to praise today's ruling. And here comes President Biden into the Roosevelt Room with the Secretary of Education right behind him. Let's listen.
Let me begin by saying I know there are millions of Americans in this country who feel disappointed and discouraged or even a little bit angry about the court's decision today on student debt. And I must admit I do too. Before I tell you the steps we're going to take and want to talk about what we've been able to, I want to talk about what we've been able to achieve so far on student loan over the past few years. First, we made the largest increase in Pell Grants in over a decade, helping students from families who nearly all make less than $60,000 a year. Then we fixed the so-called, with the help of the department, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So the borrowers who got into public service, such as school teachers, police officers, social workers, service members, they actually got the debt relief they were entitled to under the law. Before I came to office, only 7,000 people have benefited from that program. Today, over 600,000 borrowers have received relief from that program. And it's still available. So many more people can be helped. And I encourage you to apply if you haven't already. You're still eligible. Go to studentaid.gov. It matters. Third, my administration improved the program from the Obama-Biden administration on income-driven repayment plan. That's what it was referred to as. Back then, we set a limit. Student borrowers would pay no more than 10% of their disposable income to pay back their debt in any one time. My administration is going to reduce that to 5%. It's now the most generous repayment program ever. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether from a community college or a four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of their disposable income to repay their loan. And that's income after you pay for the necessities like housing, food, and the like. Typical borrower is going to save about $1,000 a year. And if you keep up payments for 20 years without missing them, your total debt is forgiven after 20 years. That's what the program was before, but we've just reduced it to 5%. In addition to that, last year I announced my student debt relief plan, a plan that was on the verge of providing more than 40 million Americans with real debt relief, up to $10,000 for many borrowers and up to $20,000 for those who had gotten a Pell Grant. Nearly 90% of the relief would have gone to borrowers, 90% of it, making less than $75,000 a year. And no one making over $125,000 would qualify. This program was all set to begin. The website had been set up, the applications had been simplified so that it took less than 5 minutes to complete. Notice had been sent out to people about the relief they were eligible for. 16 million people had already been approved. The money was literally about to go out the door. And then Republican elected officials and special interests stepped in They said, no, no. Literally snatching from the hands of millions of Americans thousands of dollars in student debt relief that was about to change their lives. You know, these Republican officials just couldn't bear the thought of providing relief for working class, middle class Americans. Republican state officials sued my administration, attempting to block relief, including millions of their own constituents. Republicans in Congress voted to overturn the plan. I think every one. I don't think I had any Republican votes for this plan. At the same time, think about this. We all supported the Paycheck Protection Program, remember, PPP? You know, which was designed to help business owners who lost money because of the pandemic. It was a worthy program, but let's be clear. Some of the same elected Republicans, members of Congress who strongly opposed giving relief to students, got hundreds of thousands of dollars themselves in relief, members of Congress, because of the businesses they were able to keep open. Several members of Congress got over $1 million. All those loans were forgiven. You know how much that program cost? $760 billion. My program's too expensive. $360 billion more than I proposed in my student debt relief program. I was trying to provide students with $10,000 to $20,000 in relief. By comparison, the average amount forgiven in the PPP, the pandemic loan program, average amount forgiven was $70,000. Now a kid making $60,000, trying to pay back his bills, asking for $10,000 in relief. Come on, the hypocrisy is stunning. You can't help a family making 75 grand a year, but you can help a millionaire and you have your debt forgiven. My plan would not only have been life-changing for millions of Americans, it would have been good for the American economy. Freeing millions of Americans from the crushing burden of student debt. More homes would have been bought, more businesses would have been started, more couples would have had the confidence to start a family. Millions of people would have felt they could get on with their lives. These Republicans blocked all that. Now, in addition to the hypocrisy, some of these Republicans in Congress are shamelessly pushing to advance a bill in the coming weeks that gives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and handouts to the wealthiest Americans. They still haven't given up on making permanent a $2 trillion tax cut that they never paid for. Never paid for. $2 trillion. So let me be clear. Republicans in Congress, it's not about reducing the deficit. It's not about fairness in forgiving loans. It's only about forgiving loans they have to pay. Today, the Supreme Court sided with them. I believe the court's decision to strike down my student debt relief program was a mistake, was wrong. I'm not going to stop fighting to deliver borrowers what they need, particularly those at the bottom end of the economic scale. So we need to find a new way, and we're moving as fast as we can. First, I'm announcing today a new path consistent with today's ruling to provide student debt relief to as many borrowers as possible, as quickly as possible. We will ground this new approach in a different law than my original plan, the so-called Higher Education Act. That will allow Secretary Cardona, who's with me today, to compromise, waive, or release loans under certain circumstances. This new path is legally sound. It's going to take longer, but in my view, it's the best path that remains to providing for as many borrowers as possible with debt relief. I've directed my team to move as quickly as possible under the law. Just moments ago, Secretary Cardona took the first step to initiate that new approach. We're not going to waste any time on this. We're getting moving on it. It's going to take longer, but we're getting at it right away. Second, we know what many borrowers will need to make their hard choices, which their budgets are being strained now when they start to repay their monthly loan payments this fall. You know, we know that figuring out how to pay these added expenses can take time for borrowers, and they might miss payments at the front end as they get back into repayment. Normally, this could lead borrowers to fall into delinquency and default. But without their it will hurt their financial security, and that's not good for them or the economy. That's why we're creating a temporary 12-month, what we're calling on-ramp repayment program. And now, this is not the same as a student loan pause. It's been in effect for the past 3 years. Monthly payments will be due. Bills will not go out, and interest will be accruing. And during this period, if you can pay your monthly bills, you should. But if you cannot, if you miss payments, this on-ramp will temporarily remove the threat of default or having your credit harmed, which can hurt borrowers for years to come. Because the Department of Education won't refer borrowers. And the reason why that will work, they won't refer borrowers who miss payments to credit agencies for 12 months to give them a chance to get back up and running. Let me close with this. Our Republican officials say student loan relief is a giveaway to the privileged. You hear that loud now, the privileged. I love the concern for the privileged. But I know who student loan borrowers are in this country. So do all you. The couple putting off having a child until they can find their way to deal with their debt. That's who they are. They're a young putting off buying their first home until they can get out from under student loans. Hope on the horizon, thanks to relief that I planned last year. Today's court decision snatches it away from them. I get it. I get it. I hear this. And I'm concerned about it. But today's decision has closed one path. Now we're going to pursue another. I'm never going to stop fighting for you. We'll use every tool at our disposal to get you the student debt relief you need and reach your dreams. It's good for the economy. It's good for the country. It's going to be good for you. Thank you very, very much for listening. We're going to get this done, God willing. Thank you.
Mr. President, why did you give millions of borrowers false hope? You've doubted your own authority here in the past.
I didn't give any false hope. The question was whether or not I would do even more than was requested. What I did, I thought was appropriate and was able to be done and would get done. I didn't give borrowers false hope, but the Republicans snatched away the hope that they were given, and it's real hope. Thank you.
Mr. President, will you cancel student debt?
Your authority. Did you overstep your authority?
I think the court misinterpreted the Constitution.
Mr. President, do you admit failure in Afghanistan? Mistakes. There was a report on Afghanistan withdrawal saying there was failure, mistakes. Do you admit there was mistakes during the withdrawal and before?
No, all the evidence is coming back there. Remember what I said about Afghanistan? I said Al-Qaeda would not be there. I said it wouldn't be there. I said we'd get help from the Taliban. What's happening now? What's going on? Read your press. I was right. Thanks.
So the report is from the State Department, actually, about the withdrawal.
President Biden there speaking from the Roosevelt Room, joined by Education Secretary Miguel Cardona, talking about the Supreme Court striking down his debt relief program. The president saying that I believe the Supreme Court's decision was a mistake. The decision was wrong. He says today's decision has closed one path. Now we're going to pursue another. He said, I'll never stop fighting for you, speaking to the 40+ million Americans who were set to receive some of this relief from their student debts. And the president also laying out next steps, although he acknowledged that they aren't quite what he was hoping for and that they would take longer. So let's go ahead and bring in Rachel Scott, who's joining us from the White House right now. And Rachel, this was a campaign promise from President Biden back in 2020. Now his debt relief program struck down by the Supreme Court, and he's limited in terms of what he can do now legally.
With a campaign promise from President Biden that he said would be a lifeline to millions of Americans out there, and now he is severely limited about his next steps. This is a White House and administration that has been very reluctant to even discuss a backup plan. They've been pressed on this repeatedly in recent weeks, and so now you see the president coming before the cameras doing exactly what he didn't want to do, which is lay out a plan B. So from the president today, you have heard him say that he will use every tool in his disposal, and so essentially you're just going to try and use another vehicle to try to get this program through, to get this aid to millions of Americans as he promised on the campaign trail. So instead, he's going to try to use the Higher Education Act, which was established at federal aid programs to offset college costs, and see if that works. But that could still be blocked. There is no guarantee that that would be successful. And President Biden even saying today that it would take longer. You also hear the president trying to give some Americans some breathing room, because the president himself acknowledged that this is a program that already started to get up and running. The website was already set. You had millions of Americans apply for it. 16 million Americans were already approved under the president's plan, and now they are at a point where they're having to figure out their next steps, what their options are. And you heard the president right there when asked by reporters in that room whether or not he gave Americans false hope. He was adamant that he did not. But most certainly, you have a lot of Americans out there that feel very let down by today's decision, Whit.
Yeah, he insisted he did not give them false hope. He said, I think the court misinterpreted the Constitution. We should also point out Republicans applauding this. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy saying the president must follow the law. We know that Republicans also talking about fairness. What about the students who paid off their debts? What about the students who made hard decisions to go to community college or didn't go to one school and chose another because they wanted to avoid going into debt? Let's bring in Terry Moran, our senior national correspondent who's covered the court for years. And Terry, we know that the court's decision very much based on the overreach, they said, of the administration's authority, and that the power, when we're talking about money on a scale like this, should be with Congress. But Terry, this was not unexpected. People saw this coming, this decision.
That's right. This was risky from the get-go because it was no secret that there were profound doubts among Democrats about the legality of the president essentially spending $430 billion on his own initiative without specific authorization for Congress on this. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker in 2021, said, and Justice Neil Gorsuch quotes her rather cheekily in his majority opinion, people think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness, Pelosi said. He does not. She said. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. President Obama, when he was president, looked at this issue, decided he didn't have the power. President Biden took a bolder step, and in fact, the Supreme Court backed him off, struck it down today. I must say that one of the arguments that the president was just making is at the very least disingenuous. He said, look at the members of Congress who benefited so much from the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP loans, that went out the door during the pandemic. Many members of Congress who voted against it took a lot of money from that program. That program was passed by Congress. The Senate and the House approved the spending of that money, and out the door it went. What the Supreme Court said today was, without congressional authorization or a clearer statement in the existing law that the president can do this on his own initiative, this program must be struck down. And as I said, this is something that was widely expected in legal circles.
And an important point, we saw that the president was prepared for this, which is why he had the education secretary there and a plan already in place for the next steps. Terry Moran, Rachel Scott, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Of course, our coverage will continue on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. And then I'll be right back here with the entire team for full coverage on World News Tonight. We now return you to your regularly scheduled program.